Hello, and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, all the things that weave at dusk. Settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. Before the first reed is bent, the marsh is already making its own arrangements. Bands of sedge lean and lift where a thin breeze crosses them. Insects pass through the air on intersecting paths too small and quick to follow for long. Shallow channels hold the sky in broken pieces, and each piece slides apart again when the water moves against last year's stems. Nothing hurries, nothing is still. The evening does not descend all at once here. It gathers itself by degrees, laying one fine layer over another. Near this slow activity, at the edge of firmer ground, a work area waits inside a circle of worn use. A low stool stands beside a narrow bench silvered at the corners from years of damp hands and clean abrasion. On the bench sits a galvanized tub, its rim catching the last pale light. The water inside has darkened to the color of weak tea from the soaking reeds, and a faint scent rises from it, green and sweet with a trace of mud and metal. At one side of the tub, the loose ends are kept together beneath a smooth river stone so they do not float and splay. The maker comes into this little radius with the ease of someone who does not need to consider where anything belongs. A cloth is folded once and set within reach. A small knife lies flat on the bench. A pair of shears rests near it, closed and quiet. The maker sits, adjusts weight on the stool, an old adjustment, practiced into ease, places both feet where the ground is level, and for a moment does nothing at all but look. There is enough light to work, though not carelessly. The west is thinning. One basket is possible in the time that remains. A small gathering basket. Nothing decorative, nothing meant to prove anything beyond usefulness and steadiness, meant for the countershelf, or for whichever hand reached for it first. The reeds have been cut earlier, sorted, trimmed, and left to take up water until they are pliant again. Even now they are not uniform. Some are flatter, some more rounded, some with a harder skin, some with a softer pith just beneath. The maker knows all this before touching them, and then knows it again more exactly through the hands. A first reed is lifted from the tub. It leaves the water with a soft hiss and a line of droplets that patter onto the bench and darken the wood. Between thumb and fingers, the maker tests the thickness, then bends it lightly against the inside of the wrist where the skin can register resistance before the eye quite names it. Another reed follows, then another. A thumbnail traces the pale seam along one edge where a bend will come more willingly. A too stiff length is set aside for stakes. A more flexible one is laid near the maker's knee. The sorting is not slow because of indecision. It is slow because haste at this point would only postpone the necessary noticing. Beyond the bench, rushes stand in vertical ranks at the water's margin. A muskrat path, old and narrow, parts a stand of grass into two brushed channels. Midges hover where the air holds warmth close to the ground. Over the open water, the last of the brighter reflections braid and unbraid. The marsh has many ways of crossing lines without knotting them. Beside it, the maker gathers the first handful of structure, firm reeds chosen for the basket's frame, and aligns them with careful pressure against the bench. There is, in these first minutes, a familiar inward leaning toward completion. The light is already less than it was. The body recognizes this and wants to get on with the work, but the work itself offers a smaller, more exact demand. Each reed must be known in hand before it can be asked to hold shape. The maker breathes once, reaches back into the tub, and lets the rhythm begin where it always begins, not with finishing in mind, but with choosing what can bear the first crossings. The firmest reeds become the center ribs. They are placed in a small bundle, then divided and crossed so the beginning looks plain enough to a casual eye, only a few pale lengths laid over one another on damp wood. Yet this plain arrangement decides much of what follows. Spacing matters. Thickness matters. The point where one set crosses the other must hold without bulging. The maker nudges each rib with thumb and forefinger until the spread feels balanced, not by measurement, but by the evenness of resistance under the hand. The first weaving reed comes up from the tub wet and cool. Its outer skin shines for a moment before the air takes that brightness away. The maker pinches one end, slips it into place at the center, and begins the over and under pattern that will bind the loose crossing into a single held point. The motions are small and practiced. Over one rib, under the next, then around, drawn snug with a turn of the wrist, not tight enough to buckle the center upward, not loose enough to let it slide apart. The fingers know the difference, though they still check. They press, pause, test the give, and continue. A few droplets fall from the moving reed onto the maker's knee. More scatter across the stool seat each time a fresh length is lifted. The cloth remains untouched for now. Dampness belongs to this stage. It keeps the reeds willing, keeps them from taking offense at the curve. The maker's hands move with a certain economy, but not with speed for its own sake. The work grows only by the pressure each crossing can honestly bear. What emerges first is not yet a basket, only a held center, a small woven coin no wider than a palm. Still, it is the first visible proof that separate reeds can become one surface. The maker turns the piece slightly and studies it in the failing light. One rib sits a little thicker than its opposite. Another wants more room. The instinct to correct everything at once rises and is set aside. Too much tidying now would disturb the whole. Better to continue outward and let the pattern distribute its force. In the marsh, the wind combs one patch of sedge flat, then lets it lift again. Ripples meet at an angle near a tuft of grass and make a brief crisscross before smoothing out. A blackbird gives a short metallic call from deeper in the reeds, and then falls silent. The maker threads the weaving reed around the center and feels the shape begin to hold through adjustments rather than control. The small disc grows. With each round, the ribs must be eased apart so the base can widen instead of crowding itself. The maker slips a fingertip between two stakes and opens the angle by a fraction. The next pass of the weaving reed settles into that new space. The center stays firm. The circle broadens. A basket begins the way a pond ring does when something touches the surface, moving outward from a single point of ordered pressure. Soon the maker changes reeds. The first weaver has done its length and lies trimmed, its end tucked discreetly into the body of the base. Another is selected, one with enough flexibility to follow the curve without roughness. This one, lifted late from the tub, still carries colder water down its sides. It gives a faint brushing sound as it slides between the maker's fingers. The join is made without fuss. The pattern continues. Over, under, around. The hands do more than one thing at once now. They guide the reed, hold the ribs open, keep the circle true, and smooth the last turn before beginning the next. The base widens to the size of a saucer, then a little more. Its surface takes on a quiet density. The ribs radiate outward in a star, becoming a wheel. Here the temptation to accelerate appears again, gentler than before. Once rhythm arrives, it can resemble permission to hurry. The maker knows this and distrusts it. Rhythm in handwork is not the same as speed. It is only the body learning where the next necessary movement waits. One side of the base begins to pull slightly tighter than the other. The circle wants to become a shallow oval. The maker stops, loosens pressure along the tighter side, eases two ribs wider across from it, and presses the center flat. The correction is minor, but it requires the one thing haste dislikes, a pause without visible progress. A reed end, exposed too long to air, begins to lose its gloss. The maker notices the change at the fingertips, not in the eye. It drags slightly where a supple reed should slide. That end is dipped back into the tub. Rings move across the tea-dark water and nudge the river stone. For a moment the tub holds a thin reflection of the upper sky and the blurred suggestion of rushes. Then the surface settles, and the maker lifts the reed again, renewed enough for the next turns. The marsh keeps its own repeating patterns nearby. Gnats gather in a denser cloud over the warmer shallows. Water presses softly against a line of grass and withdraws. A swallow makes one late sweep low over the channel and is gone. None of these actions are identical to the last, though each belongs to a known cycle. So it is at the bench, where the widening base acquires calm through recurrence shaped by small differences. The maker's shoulders loosen. Time is still present. Light continues to thin. But the work now occupies more of attention than the idea of completing it. By the time the base reaches its intended breadth, broad enough for a handful of beans or small apples or the clipped ends of herbs, it rests with modest authority in the maker's hands. The circle is not mechanical. One can see, if close enough, the slight variance in the widths of the reeds, the minute unevenness that proves touch has been involved, yet it sits level on the bench. It holds. The next step waits, more delicate than the widening rounds. The flat structure must become a vessel. What has lain horizontal must be asked to rise. The maker draws the basket closer and selects a fresh reed from the tub, softer and more forgiving. One by one, the outer stakes are prepared for the turn. They have spent the last half hour lying in the plane of the base. To lift them too quickly would leave white stress marks, or worse, a hard crease that never disappears. The maker moistens fingertips, runs them along the first stake, and bends it upward little by little. Not a sharp angle. A coaxing. The reed resists, then accepts. The next follows, then the next. This is the most visible change so far, and the one the hands have been building toward without quite naming it. The woven disc ceases to be only a surface. Its edges begin to stand. Around the work area, the rushes hold the same vertical intention, stems rising from dark water in loose ranks. Slender lengths persuaded to stand and contain space. The maker has finished baskets in worse light and better, but each one arrives at this moment, flat becoming upright, surface becoming form, as if the material had never quite agreed to it before, and was agreeing again fresh. A few stakes spring outward after being set. The maker does not fight them at once. The hands move around the circle, lifting each in turn, giving all of them a chance to begin the curve before anyone is judged. Light has faded another degree. The color difference between greenish reeds and more straw-colored ones is harder to read now, and the maker relies more heavily on touch. The thumbnail finds the seam. The fingertips feel where the skin is smooth, and where a slight roughness warns of strain. One stubborn stake is dampened again, held between both hands, and bent a second time with slower pressure. This time it stays. Once the stakes are upright enough to suggest walls, the weaving reed begins circling them. The pattern changes only a little, but the body of the basket changes entirely. The maker feeds the reed around the rising ribs, drawing it close so the first wall round cinches them together. Force here, and the basket tightens unevenly, and every round above will show that strain. The maker feels the pull toward speed and releases it. A fresh reed is dipped. The cloth is used for the first time, not to dry the material, but to wipe excess water from the fingers so the grip can be cleaner. The basket rests against one knee while the maker presses gently at the base, establishing the rise evenly all around before climbing further. The wall begins not with urgency, but with an agreement between moisture, pressure, and curve. The first rounds climb. The basket now casts a different kind of shadow on the bench, deeper in the middle, the rim edge still catching a last pale line. The maker turns it and turns it, always in the same direction, adding height in measured rings. A low rasping whisper comes from reed against reed, softer than paper, firmer than grass. Once in a while the knife is lifted to trim a frayed end. Metal touches wood with a small definite sound, then settles again. Beyond this circle of work, the marsh also changes from flatness into layers. What was all surface earlier now separates into nearer dark, middle dimness, and a lighter band still holding the west. Birds that used to call from several directions reduce themselves to one or two occasional notes. The insects become more audible as the larger sounds withdraw. The air cools just enough for damp to gather in the cloth and along the maker's wrists. The basket walls continue upward. One side grows a fraction higher than the other. The maker sees it at a tilt against the horizon and corrects without annoyance, compressing 2 rounds gently on the taller side and easing the opposite open with a thumb. The structure answers at once. The reeds need only to be guided where the basket is asking to go. As the rounds accumulate, the maker's movements become quieter. There are fewer unnecessary checks. The hands trust touch more readily now that sight offers less detail. The basket is lifted now and then to eye level, its shape judged against the dim standing rushes, then returned to the knee. A reed nearing the end of its usefulness shows a slight crease where it crosses a stake. The maker feels the warning, stops, and examines it. Not a failure, only a limit. The reed is shortened cleanly, its sound portion tucked in, and another length is joined to continue the wall. The change is nearly invisible when done. By now the basket has the look of a useful thing. It can receive and hold. Its sides rise in an even, shallow curve. It would be possible from impatience to believe it nearly finished. Yet what remains matters most. The top edge will decide whether the basket feels complete in the hand or merely stopped. Night approaches without any dramatic announcement. A coolness moves over the bench. The tub's metal no longer reflects the sky so much as it absorbs a mute version of it. The water inside has gone nearly black except where a reed disturbs the surface. In the marsh, day does not end all at once. It changes register. A heron that has stood motionless near the farther bank lifts heavily and disappears into the dim. Small fish break the channel in soft ticks. The first bat appears as a brief cut shape over water, then another, each turning in arcs too quick to hold in view. The maker is aware of it all at the edges. The way cooling air is aware of the shapes it moves around. The urge to race the light has thinned without announcement. There is room now for only the next true action. When the walls reach their intended height, the maker rests both hands around the basket and feels its circumference. The form is there. The stakes rise beyond the last woven round like a fringe of damp, narrow tongues waiting to be finished. This is the rim, the least forgiving stage, and often the one that gives the hand away. A clumsy rim can make a careful body look anxious. A clean one lets the basket seem inevitable. The spare reeds are shifted aside. The knife is picked up, used for a few light trims, and laid down again. Each upright stake is inspected by touch and by what remains of sight. Some are longer than needed. Some are more flexible. Some need a little more water before they can bend without complaint. The maker chooses an order. Not every stake will fold identically, and not every fold will feel the same. The goal is not sameness. It is an edge that holds. A section near one side feels drier than the rest. Earlier in the evening, the maker might have risked it, counting on experience to carry the bend through. Now the hand stops. The basket is lowered. That portion of the rim is dipped carefully into the tub, not enough to soak the whole basket, only enough to soften what must turn. Water beads and runs down the wall in thin lines. The maker waits. A bat flickers once over the channel. Insects continue their near-invisible crossings through the darkening air. Then the first stake is bent over and tucked. The motion is deliberate and smooth, the thumb supporting the outside, while the forefinger guides the tip inward. Another follows, then another, each wrapping the previous one into place. The structure tightens at the top. The rim closes by degrees, the distinctions between form and dark softening, until the edge is felt more than seen. The maker's hands work close to the face now, then lower the basket again to feel the result. Sight confirms less. Touch confirms more. There is a moment when one stake resists just enough to threaten a crack. The maker hears the faintest dry complaint in the fiber. Everything stops. No effort is wasted in pretending the sound did not happen. The stake is eased back, not forced onward. Thumb and finger move along its length, locate the point of tension, and moisten it again from the cloth. The basket rests against the knee while both hands wait for suppleness to return. This pause, too, belongs to the work. At this hour, interruption and attention look the same. Around them, the marsh grows more legible in sound than in sight. The channels are dark bands. The rushes are masses with slender edges. Bats write quick angles through the open space above the water and vanish before the eye can follow. The insects hold a steady field of sound with no single source easy to place. Somewhere farther back in the reeds, a bird shifts position in the night with a brief dry rustle. The maker, in the small pool of fading usefulness left by the sky, completes the next tuck and the next. Loose ends disappear into the pattern. The top edge rounds under the fingers and begins to feel complete before it can be clearly seen. The maker rotates the basket after every fold, checking for snags, smoothing any raised fiber with a thumbnail, trimming where necessary. A final binding reed is drawn around part of the rim to neaten the line and lock the tension. It slides through with a whisper and settles. The maker presses it home, testing the firmness all the way around. There is no dramatic finish, only a last sequence of exact movements: bend, tuck, draw through, press, trim, smooth. At the end of these, the hands remain on the basket a moment longer than required, not out of ceremony, but out of recognition. The work has arrived where it needs to be. The feeling is quieter than satisfaction, and better matched the evening. The basket is finished not because the light has been defeated, but because the hands stopped arguing with the pace of reed and dark. The maker lowers it to the bench beside the tub. Its shape rests open and modest in the dimness, a small vessel holding only shadow for now. One hand moves around the rim once more, confirming the continuity of the edge. Another palm presses the base flat against the wood. It sits level. The wall curves evenly. Here and there the surface still gleams where recent moisture has not yet dulled. The spare reeds remain beneath the smooth river stone, their use postponed to another evening. The shears lie where they were last placed. The knife is wiped and set down. Water in the tub settles from its last disturbance and gathers the thin leftover brightness of the sky. Beyond the bench, the marsh continues with its own patient structures. The rushes stand dark at their roots. The channels carry almost no color now, only a faint difference between water and bank. Bats pass and pass again over the open stretches. Insects maintain their stitched field of sound. Whatever is nested deeper in grass and sedge has quieted into forms no longer visible. Nothing announces completion, yet many small arrangements have reached their evening shape. The maker sits for one more minute, hands emptied of task. The basket remains within reach, beside the dim tub, its rim holding the last trace of pale sky before that trace disappears as well. Then even the metal loses its shine. The work area becomes part of the same dark pattern as the reeds, the bench, the water, and the standing marsh beyond, one more made thing resting among the others, while the night continues to gather. Thank you for spending this time with the Night Sky Reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.